It's time to sharpen my axe. Now, while it isn't blunt, it's definitely not quite as sharp as I would like it. It's not biting into the wood the way that I like. It's definitely not quite sharp enough that I can get away with just stropping. So I'm going to take it to some stones. I'm starting with the Naniwa Pro 1000 grit. That should bring a burr up pretty quick on this edge. And then I'm going to move up through some grits, finish on some stropping, and see where that gets us. $548. I can definitely do better than that. Okay. This little carving hatchet has a nice continuous curve to the edge, but it does mean then I need to rock it ever so slightly from heel to toe to maintain this angle. Okay. Still need to raise the bevel a bit in the middle. Need to raise a burr a bit in the middle of the bevel. Okay. Alright. So raise the burr on both sides. Now just trying to knock that burr off a little bit. Ooh. Cool. Now let's go up to the 3000 grit Naniwa Pro. Really like it when you get a lot of metal being left behind on the surface of the stone, because it can really clearly show you where on the bevel you're actually hitting it. Like the Sharpening glass stones, they're really good for that because they've got a white surface, so the metal here, the swarf, shows up really strongly on them. But this is nice. So this is a carving hatchet, so it's got these really nice big bevels, and you carve along the fibers of the wood with axes like felling axe. You chop kind of perpendicular between the fibers, and so a kind of convex edge might be nicer for that because it's a little bit stronger, but this is quite a fine woodworking tool despite it being an axe, and so that's why I'm taking it up to these relatively high grits. So really I want this edge to be about as sharp as my Sloyd knife, as my little carving knife. So as I mentioned earlier, like it wasn't quite biting into the wood how I like it to. It makes it a lot safer if it's really sharp because it will bite into the wood, it won't glance off. Now, because it's an impact tool, you are slamming it into some wood. I'm a little dubious about how long these like super fine edges last, but I do stop and strop quite often, and stropping will give you a bit of a micro bevel on the edge, strengthen it up. But if you're interested in perhaps seeing a video where I see how the edge deteriorates over time, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can put one of those together. Okay, got that burr again. Bit of deburring. I like to deburr edge trailing. If you've watched the video where I interview Kyle from Workshop, he makes a really good point that when you're doing the initial sharpening, it doesn't really matter if you go backwards or forwards, if you go edge trailing or edge leading, you're just trying to remove metal. So back and forth or one or the other is perfectly fine, but when you want that final edge surface, I'm camp edge trailing, so let me know if you're edge trailing or edge leading for those finishing strokes. Okay, it's feeling pretty good. Could stop there, but I feel like going up to 5,000 grit, so let's do it. Typically for woodworking tools, I quite like going up to between 5,000 and 8,000 grit, especially when you're using tools that require kind of push cuts through the wood. So things like my Sloyd knives, my draw knives. With an axe, because it's an impact tool, you can get away with a little bit of a duller edge. I also quite like to leave a tooled finish on my woodworking projects, so I don't sand them down. And if you've got extremely sharp tools, then you can leave a really nice, clean, shiny surface on the wood because you're cutting all of those fibers to the same length. It's quite an intensive process to get a similar finish with sandpaper, and it gives it a certain kind of aesthetic to have those tool marks on there. Okay, interested to see where that is at on the edge on up. I'm still gonna strop the axe, so this isn't the final edge, but just curious. Okay, so 380. Not bad off the stone, but I'm gonna just strop now and see where that gets us. Just our extra large paddle strop with green honing compound. In this position, I can see right down the edge, so I know that I'm hitting the bevel the way that I want to. So stropping is a great way to keep an edge sharp in between taking it to your bench stones, but it does create that little secondary micro bevel, and for a tool like this where you're using the bevel to guide the cut, that secondary bevel can make it a little bit difficult to know exactly where the axe is going to want to bite, what angle you need to approach the wood at. So one way to help prevent that is, instead of hitting the bevel angle exactly, you can back off a little bit so you have less of a rounding action. So we're looking real shiny. See where we're at. $104 grams, pretty sharp. Good enough to carve with, that's for sure.